Uh, I got started writing for children in a way by mistake. I took a leave of absence from a teaching job and was camped out in the desert to see if I really wanted to write full-time or not. I was working on a very complex set of adult stories, and one day I decided I'm just going to write a story about a cat, and started writing on an old typewriter that I got secondhand, and so I wrote the first story about the cat named Brup. And I didn't think of it as a child's book. I just wrote the story. And I think in my mind was Le Petit Prince, the Little Prince, and how some of the stories that I love are both for children and for adults. And so this story about the cat came to the surface while I was also writing adult poetry and fiction. So when I sent that manuscript to 12 publishers, not saying this is a children's book, one publisher called me, one publisher from the Prince Edward Island, Ragweed Press publisher called. I had several rejections from other publishers saying we're not doing talking animal children's books anymore. So I thought, oh, they think it's a children's book, maybe it is. And then the person who called me from Ragweed Press really loved the story. So I told her if I didn't hear by the end of the month from one of the big Macmillan and McClellan and Stewart, that I would have her publish it, and she did. So that's how that began. I did start writing when I was about 13, keeping a journal, a diary. And I think at that point, I knew that writing was a part of what I did. And because in the middle of the day, when I was at school, I had a panic attack that my mother would read my diary. And I couldn't wait to get home and find whether or not she'd been in my room. And I was so nervous because I wrote, I guess so frankly in my journal, that I hid things and put a hair, over a drawer. And I had a Snoopy sister too, so I had all little things set up so I could tell if anyone had been in my room. I mean, my mother or my sister. And she hadn't, but I was so relieved and also realized that I couldn't stand that agony anymore. So I went right out to the burn bin in the backyard and I tore up my diary and I burned it. And then I didn't keep one again until I was 17. But that relationship with the written word. So I was writing stories and I did really well in English, and I wrote stories and poems and songs. I play guitar and make up songs. So the writing was something that I did fairly early, although I never thought of earning a living at it. So how things have changed over the years in children's literature. The first Brup was banned in Halifax. And it made the sales go very well. And in fact, the book was reprinted a number of times, and then second, third, fourth Brup, and so on, and foreign rights and translations. So it was a successful children's book. But One Mother Returned, is it Woozles? Mm-hmm. Wonderful, I love Woozles. But a mother returned the book, Brup, the first Brup, The Private Adventures, to Woozles, and said that it was, uncaring, a harsh treatment of death in it for a children's book, or something like that. And so the Woozles owner decided to not carry the book. Because Brup does witness a dog being killed. And he's fairly cold-hearted about it because he's, as he puts it, he was never fond of dogs. And so I think that's interesting. And I talked about that with the owner. We had a good conversation on the phone. How about Bambi? Bambi's mother, what about? All these books in children's literature. But I think that would not have happened now. That there's so much more realism in children's, both in the picture books and in the novels. I think the first Governor General's English text jury I was on was 1995, and I've been on 4 so far, and one in 2007, and then this past year. So I've read an array of children's books, novels, chapter books, and YA novels. And what's changed is the amount of reality. Familial, divorce, abuse, all kinds of self-cutting, all kinds of psychological difficulties, and then the exterior world. Wonderful, incredible books about Afghanistan and Iran and China, and all of the realism that's in children's literature now is, I think, different from when Brupp was first published in 1983. Earlier years, perhaps, I think of Mark Twain and all of the Deerslayer and all of the earlier books, where there was a harsher reality, but that the kind of period of hypersensitivity about what children can or cannot read when children's literature started developing in Canada in the 70s and 80s. And so there were perhaps more strictures at that period than there are now.